Hey guys, welcome to this Bitcoin for Beginners presentation or an intro to Bitcoin. I know some of you probably might be brand new to Bitcoin here, and I assure you this is a very non-technical presentation. You can take this 10-minute presentation, send it to your grandma, she'll understand what Bitcoin is. Because like this meme says here, one does not simply understand what is Bitcoin. And that's probably one of the main disadvantages of Bitcoin today, is that it's far too technical for someone who doesn't have a developer background to understand. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole history of Bitcoin. I'm just going to try to explain the concept as a general, so let's kind of get right to it. The first thing we need to talk about before we talk about what even Bitcoin is what is money. And let's take an example of money. If we take a look like 1,000, 2,000 years ago, if I wanted, for example, to get something from you, let's say you have sheep, and I am a carpenter. So I could, for example, make a chair out of wood for you and say, hey, here's a chair, give me that sheep. And I'll work okay. But what if, for example, you didn't need a chair? Then I would kind of be stuck because I still need that sheep, and that chair wouldn't be worth anything to you. So money was invented kind of as a mediator of value. So I can sell my chair to someone else who needs it for money, and then give that money to you because you have value in that money. You'll say, okay, I don't need a chair, but I do need this store of value, which is called money, which I can later on use to buy something else. So in very basic form, money is a mean for transferring value. It's kind of like a third party that you exchange stuff to, a currency that you exchange stuff to, and then you can use later on. You can kind of store this value in form of a paper or metal coins. Now, let's say but you have to remember that money was invented a long time ago, and it almost hasn't had any transformation whatsoever throughout the years. But let's say we want to invent money today. Then let's try to think about this for a moment. If we were to invent money today in the 21st century, what would be its characteristics? Let's start out with what we won't want. The first thing I believe that we wouldn't want is that it wouldn't be constructed out of paper and metal coins. Or maybe it wouldn't be physical at all. Because, for example, metal coins are really hard to carry around. They're not very user-friendly. And that's probably one of the reasons paper was invented, because it's much easier to carry around. But also paper can be worn out, you can lose it, it can fall out of your pocket, stuff like that. The second thing is that you definitely wouldn't want money to be controlled by one entity. Especially if this is kind of a store of a consensus that everybody agrees upon on storing value. You wouldn't want to have one entity controlling, for example, how much money is printed out, which is what's happening today. Kind of being able to manipulate the value of that money through different methods. So you would probably want it to kind of be spread around everybody and no one having complete control, because that can create a lot of problems. Let's talk about now what you would want money to look like. Well, the first thing I guess that we would want it to look like is that it will be digital. Especially if this is the 21st century, you want something that you don't have to carry on you, that you can access from any point in the world. You don't have to carry, for example, if you travel to another country, you don't have to change to a different currency, because it's all digital and we're all speaking in the same language of money. That's another thing, by the way, that I didn't put in this presentation. You want it to be universal, which is not what's happening today. Each country has its own form of money, but we'll talk about that probably in a different presentation. So making money digital makes it much more easier to use and easier to access. Another thing is you want it to be decentralized, and that's exactly what I talked about a minute ago, about not wanting to have it being controlled by one single entity. Now, once it's decentralized and everybody sees everything that's going on, it's going to be much harder for a single individual to manipulate the system. And in a second, you'll understand why decentralization is so important. So now that we have the characteristics jotted down, let's get to work. Let's actually create the money. So the first step will be to sign everyone up. Just like you sign someone for a website, we're going to have to sign people for this new form of money. So we're going to have people have specific usernames, for example, or addresses. Let's take email. You have an email address. My email address, for example, is ophir@99bitcoins.com. There's no other person in the world that has that same email address. It's what's called a unique identifier. So in this case, we're going to get everyone a Bitcoin address. I'm going to just use Bitcoin as an example here, but this could be on any other sort of money you'd like. So we're going to get everybody a Bitcoin address with just like an email address. It's a unique identifier. And let me show you for a second how these addresses look like, because they're not very user-friendly. Like I said, Bitcoin is a bit of a technical issue. So, for example, if I go here, this is my website, by the way, 99 Bitcoins. We'll talk about it a bit later. you see this here, this is a Bitcoin address. It's a very not user-friendly string of letters and numbers. And this is a unique identifier. No other person in the whole Bitcoin ecosystem has this address. If you send money, for example, this address, this is my unique identifier, only I get it. No one else does. So now we're going to have to sign everybody up. Everyone who signs up for this new form of money is going to have a specific address, a unique address. Now that we have everybody sign up, we need to start keeping score about how much money everybody has. So let's say, for example, I have 2 Bitcoins. It's going to read a whole long string of letters and numbers and say, this address has 2 Bitcoins. Now, we're going to keep this score in some sort of a ledger. It's basically a big-ass file that's called a blockchain that keeps score of all of the addresses and the amounts they have. So, for example, my address will have 2 Bitcoins, your address will have 100 Bitcoins, and so on and so on. The thing is, and here's the trick, we're going to spread this ledger around to everyone to see. So everything is transparent. You can now know exactly how much Bitcoins are in my address, and I can know exactly how much Bitcoins are in your address. Well, you're saying, hey, but that's not good because you can know how much money I have. I don't want you to know how much money I have. Well, here it gets a bit tricky because right now I told you, for example, if I go back to my address, I told you that this is my address. But if you would just see this on some website, you wouldn't know that this is my address. Or I can just, nobody knows that this address is linked to me unless I tell you it. So it's kind of what's called pseudonymous. It's half anonymous. It's not actually anonymous. But the fact that this is spread around to everyone and everybody can see what's going in and out of the blockchain, this big ledger, then it makes it a lot harder for people to manipulate the system. If I, for example, say because everything here is digital and I'm a very talented hacker and I want to say, hey, I don't have 1 Bitcoin, I have 10,000 Bitcoins. Well, in this case, this won't add up to what everybody else sees in their ledger. Because just imagine that there are thousands of ledgers spread out around the world, and suddenly I say, hey, I have 10,000 Bitcoins, here's 5,000 of them. Then people will kind of check and say in their ledger before accepting the transaction and say, hey, you don't have 10,000 Bitcoins, you have 1 Bitcoin. You're a cheater, get out of here, or something like that, I don't know. So the thing is, once you decentralize the system, you spread it out to a lot of people to kind of check it, you balance it out so that it's really hard to hack it. Now, of course, people are going to have to invest some work in kind of enforcing the rules here. I said people are going to check each transaction and say if I actually have the money I say I have. Well, that takes a lot of computing power, a lot of electricity. People are not going to do this for free. So the last thing you want to do is create incentive. Basically, want to make sure that people enforce the rules that you set up. And here I'm going to talk about the last thing. We talked about, I'm just going to kind of recap until now. We talked about the characteristics we want for money, and then we said we're going to sign everybody up, give them a unique identifier, and then we're going to have this big ledger which has all of the addresses and keeps scores of what happened. The last step of the process is making sure that everybody follows the rules. And you make that by kind of letting people enforce the rules themselves. And these people who enforce the rules are called miners. And in a second, I'll explain why they're called miners and a bit about what is Bitcoin mining. But the thing is to know that these miners, what they do is they use a lot of computing power to kind of check that everything is in order, that everybody has the exact amount of Bitcoins they say they have, that transactions have come in order, nobody's trying to manipulate the system, saying they have more money than they actually have. And if they do a good work, then the system kind of generates new coins and gives it to them as a compensation, as a bounty. And that's how new coins are being implemented inside the system. There can only be 21 million Bitcoins. That's kind of what the protocol states. And today, if you take a look, for example, on another website, this is a website called blockchain.info. Not to be mistaken with the blockchain file, which is the ledger. There's a website called blockchain.info. It's a private company. It's not relevant to the whole blockchain file. And then give you a lot of statistics about the Bitcoin network. And here you can see the total number of Bitcoin circulations. So up until today, 13.5 million Bitcoins were generated out of a total of 21 million that can ever exist. So each time, as you can see, they're generated linearly. So as time passes, each time a miner does his work and enforces the rules, and and make sure that everybody's playing by the rules and no one's scamming the system, they get some sort of bounty. And that's how new Bitcoins are generated. That's why it's called mining, or what they are called miners, because they kind of mine Bitcoins from the system. It's the same as, I don't know, mining gold, because gold is scarce And also Bitcoin is scarce because it has a limited value. So to kind of wrap things up, we decided on the characteristics. We gave everyone a unique identifier. We started writing it up in a ledger how much everybody owns. And then we kind of made sure that people follow the rules by giving them the right incentive. And that's basically it. You've just created a new form of money. And that's exactly what Bitcoin is. It's a decentralized digital currency. And if you think about it, if money was invented today, this is probably at least one of the ways that people would have said, hey, this is how money should look like. But if money was invented, but I can tell you for a fact that if money were to be invented today, they wouldn't use metal coins and paper. That's probably is a fact. They might not choose the form of Bitcoin, which also has its cons, but a lot of pros, but they definitely wouldn't use the same system we're using today. And I'm especially talking about the reason that one entity controls all of the supply of money. So this is it for the presentation. And like I said, this is one of the main issues with Bitcoin is that it takes like a 10-minute presentation just to explain the concept. But hopefully you can just send this out to other people who are now interested about Bitcoin, and you'll have like a link to this presentation you can send out if they want to get much more interested. And I know you probably have still a lot of questions in your head, like, hey, okay, how exactly do I send Bitcoin? How are these addresses generated and all of that? And just before I wrap up, I want to show you 99 Bitcoin, which is my website, which kind of comes to answer on all these questions. It's a beginner's website. Basically, it's all the information you need to get started with Bitcoin. And it all has tutorials, video tutorials, very simple video tutorials, just like the one we went through right now, which explains all of the concept. For example, here in the frequently asked questions section, what is a Bitcoin wallet? What is mining? Because I know you probably heard about wallets and you don't know what they are. And we've talked a bit about mining in this presentation. And also, if you aren't involved with Bitcoin yet, you can just enter your email up here, and you'll get your first 0.1 millibitcoin sent to you for free, which is a small fraction of a Bitcoin, just so you can kind of experience your first Bitcoin transaction. You'll need to create your own wallet and send me your public address so I can send you the coins, and you kind of get the feel of how it works. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, you can also email me on the website. My email is ophir@99bitcoins.com. I hope you enjoyed this and have a great day.